Hello, welcome to the channel. This is What If Naruto Saves Karin from a Bear in the Forest of Death Part 5. If you like the video, check out the author in the description and comment below to what fanfic to make a video on. And subscribe, like, and share so other people can check out this video.
Itachi walked through the woodlands, closing in on the hidden leaf, with his partner in tow. The orders from Pain had come in to find out the status of the Jinchuriki in the wake of the failed invasion. There had been no sign of the one-tailed raccoon dog's container since then, at least not from the stray sand shinobi they questioned not too long ago. To that end, he and Kasame had been chosen to carry out the mission due to his knowledge of the terrain and abilities being better suited to investigation. That was for the best. He knew of the patrol route and could avoid any unnecessary encounters that would alarm the general shinobi population. He glanced under the brim of his hat to his partner. It had been some time since Kasame had the chance to exercise his more violent tendencies, so he was itchy to act upon them. The rogue Uchiha hoped that he could control him, but he was still far more manageable than most of the others in the organization. As they grew closer to the wall bordering the village, Itachi stopped and made a set of hand seals. The earth opened up like a parting maw as chakra shifted the dirt beneath it to create a path for them to take under the ground and into the leaf. While the detection system acted as a sphere rather than a dome and would pick it up if anyone else tried, he could get by it without any trouble and avoid alarming anyone. Once they'd cleared the underground path and created an opening in an out-of-the-way spot, Itachi used a genjutsu to cover it up. Then he and Kasame layered a transformation upon themselves, leaving his living blade wrapped in cloth to appear as a pair of laborers. There were plenty going around with all of the rebuilding going on from the damage done by the giant summonings rampaging around. The ground was cracked with fissures running up and down from deep depressions. Buildings as far as the eye could see were in the process of being rebuilt. Men walking around in tanned and plain clothes while carrying supplies and building materials. It was somewhat disheartening to see his old home in such a state, but the circumstances could have been far, far worse. "So how we doing this?" Kasame asked. His chosen transformation had left his skin pale in tone with black hair that spiked upwards. "We find some Anbu and make them talk. That's always fun." "But not necessary," Itachi said as he activated his Sharingan behind the cover of his transformation, making it seem as though he was looking through a tinted lens. "I remember several of the identities of those among their rank from my time on active duty. Given the scope of what has happened, all of them will likely have the answers we're looking for. I just need to make eye contact and I can get the information without needing to shed blood." The truth was a bit more complicated than that. The Hawkage had a plant, so to speak. With the aid of a Yamanaka, they could be made to hold information to be given to him, and by extension Pain. This allowed them to control what information got leaked to Akatsuki. "Faye, that's boring," Kasame whined. But he followed behind him as they walked through the streets until Itachi spotted the plant agent, an off-duty man sitting in a food vendor while eating alone. They entered and placed an order, with Itachi using his Sharingan to make the chef tune out and ignore the three of them after placing their order while he enthralled the man to have him spill classified information. Kasame listened impassively while savoring his takoyaki made of imported octopi, as the pair spoke in a muted tone. The man revealed the one-tailed Jinchuriki had been captured after its defeat by the nine-tailed Jinchuriki, placed in a private facility under heavy guard, and there were no plans to execute him at the moment. As far as Kasame would know, it was all the man had to offer, as he had seen Itachi do the same thing numerous times. Once Itachi finished retrieving the information, he planted a suggestion for the man to depart in a hurry. This left the two alone to eat in peace as they contemplated what action to take next with the information. "Any idea which place they're holding him?" his partner asked. Itachi nodded his head slightly. "I can think of a few locations, but we'd never be able to infiltrate them without causing a pandemonium. In a best-case scenario, they'd move him while we were bogged down fighting. For now, we should simply take the information we have and get it to Pain as quickly as possible." Any further conversation died when two jounin walked in that he recognized, Kurenai Yuyuhi and Asuma Sartobai. It seemed like they were meeting alone as they took a seat next to one another at the stall and placed their own orders. This could prove troublesome, Itachi thought to himself as Kasama spared them the occasional glance to size them up. The chef was still under a command to ignore Kasama and Itachi, which the woman was likely to notice in enough time given her reputation. Any effort on his part to change that would probably alert them faster. And then, to make his life more complicated, Kakashi Hadake walked in and took a seat next to them. From the conversation that sprung up, it seemed like he was thanking the woman for her efforts in tutoring his student before the exams. When she inquired about the girl's health, he said she doesn't remember much of that day from head trauma, but Sasuke was filling her in on the details and would actually be meeting him there to discuss a training regimen. That gave Itachi a minor compulsion to want to stay and listen in on his little brother's progress and growth. While he personally approved of allowing Kakashi to be Sasuke's teacher, he still couldn't help but wonder how his growth was going beyond the occasional reports from the Hokage. But no, they needed to leave while they could. "Let's get back to work," he said, standing from his seat. The act grabbed the three Leaf Shinobi's attention for a moment, but they seemingly brushed it off as the second laborer shoved the rest of his takoyaki on a stick into his mouth and then followed him out. No sooner than they were halfway back to the opening he created did the world around them swirl. They soon found themselves bound by thick tree roots the size of anacondas. Itachi only let loose a soft sigh. "Busted, huh?" Kasame chuckled as he glanced over to Itachi, ignoring the woman appearing from the tree roots with a kunai in her hand. "So much for that plan, eh?" Itachi said nothing as he dispelled the illusion placed upon them. The moment it vanished, they found themselves surrounded on three sides by Kakashi, Kurenai, and Asuma. So much for getting in and out without a fight now, he supposed. "So what gave us away?" Kasama asked as he rubbed his nose while still under the transformation technique. A grin stretched across his face as he did so. Asuma spat out his cigarette and crushed it beneath his combat sandals as he reached for his weapons. Next to the Chunin exams, a reconstruction period is when a village is most vulnerable to infiltration, since there's an influx of supplies and outside hands to deal with the repairs. Yet, for laborers, your hands are remarkably uncalloused. Not to mention most have the same break period and don't leave the food vendors outside their work area. But the tools on your belts are better suited for stonework and masonry. That group has already had their break hours ago, and woodworking is being done around this area, Kurenai noted. The fact that you placed a genjutsu on the chef to ignore your presence was something I couldn't help but notice as you left as well. And breaking out of that genjutsu so easily all but confirms it, Kakashi finished, rounding out the three. I've already sent for Anbu with a shadow clone, so how about you drop the disguises and surrender peacefully? HM? Damn their perceptiveness, Itachi thought as he went ahead and dropped his transformation. He hated the thought of having to cripple the Leaf's forces further after the invasion, but he had to keep his cover in the organization intact. That meant dealing with this efficiently. "Let's not waste time then, Kasame." Shizune hummed softly as she watched Taunton nibble on her lunch. It was midday and her mistress had gotten herself drunk as usual the night before. There was no doubt that once her deep slumber ended when evening came around, she would likely be in need of something for her hangover. Looking at Taunton left her deep in thought. How long had she been away from the Leaf now, keeping an eye on the woman that her uncle had fallen for? How long had the strong Sannin that she had followed out on her sabbatical been wandering around aimlessly to forget the pain of her past and losses? Her musings were interrupted when Taunton suddenly lifted her head and wiggled her snout towards the door. Someone was coming then. While Shizune was wishing that it was just someone passing by, she didn't have high hopes of that. Several experiences in the past, dealing with those who her lady had some outstanding debts with and came to collect, had taught her better over the years. "Is it another debt collector?" she asked. Taunton shook her head. "Buhai, Buhai." Not one of the ones they'd met so far, Shizune translated. Do you smell anything else familiar about them? A nod this time. Boo-boo hi. A toad. That brought to mind the missive that they received some time back from the Leaf. While she had only met Lord Jiraiya a few times, she knew that he definitely had that scent on him a great deal of the time. Her lady had made jokes about it sometimes while inebriated. It was likely him, and as she was affiliated with the Leaf, she should hear him out. Not to mention that if he was coming personally, then they probably wanted them to return to the village. But her lady wouldn't likely be willing to deal with him so soon. In fact, she'd been very vocal about what to do if someone from the Leaf came while she was out cold. Either drive them off or run away, even if she had to cart her off in a drunken stupor. Since she couldn't drive off someone of his level, nor wanted to risk it and offend him, she opted for the latter option. Shizune opened the window to get ready to do just that when she found the toad sage there already. He was sitting cross-legged on the wall, defying gravity with a smile on his face. There was no scent coming off of him. "It's not nice to try and run, Shizune-chan," he said calmly. Jiraiya-sama, she backed away a few steps as he climbed inside of the room. "If you're here, then who is it that Taunton smelled?" No sooner than she asked did a storage tag slip under the door and then released its contents. A blond boy popped out and looked around the room until he saw the toad sage and then opened it. There was a black-haired boy with a toad on his head waiting, who stepped inside as the blond one vanished in a puff of smoke. "Told you it'd work," he said to the older shinobi as he picked up the tag. "Pay up." Yeah, just get back to the room and start working on those balloons," said the toad sage as he closed the window. The boy grumbled under his breath and then left out. Lord Jiraiya then turned back to her. "It's been a while since I've seen you, Shizune-chan. You've gotten bigger." She inclined her head low at the man, having been caught trying to run away. It was technically an act of treason. "I'm sorry. I'll accept whatever punishment you want to give me." "I expected Princess would have given you instructions to fly the coop if I came sniffing around, and the old man hasn't made it an official request yet, so there's no harm done." He looked over to Tsunade's inelegant sleeping form. "How's she doing?" "About the same as the last time we met," she admitted. The death of her uncle and her lady's brother had rendered the woman on a self-destructive path, slow suicide in all but name. By going with her and caring for her, Shizune hoped that she could at least slow her degradation to an extent. He must have understood that too, because he set a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Thanks for looking after the princess all of this time for us. It couldn't have been easy, and you shouldn't have had to spend so many years of your childhood doing so alone." "It hasn't been a burden," she told him in a voice that was soft, yet honest. "There's nothing I would have rather been doing, and I've learned a lot, so it hasn't been a waste. She just wanted to see to it that her lady returned to how she was before. Shizune just wanted to see her happy again, like Tsunade had been when her uncle was around. If keeping her company meant that she could see her smiling again and happy, then the years spent wouldn't matter whether it was another year from now or 10. "Me too, Shizune-chan," the toad sage said as he took a seat near where she had been. "Me and the old man want nothing more than that after everything's been said and done these last few weeks. That's why I'm here now." "So they have come to bring us back," she figured. "Can it wait until she wakes up? She's had a long day." "Sure," he said. "I'll fill you in on what's been happening in the village until now, while we wait." "Well, that turned out more fun than I thought," Kasama said with his trademark grin as they stood within the confines of an alley. They were in a nearby town, having escaped the village and the pursuing Anbu officers. Well, not so much escape as Kasama had all but sheared through enough of their numbers that they called the chase off after they were a good distance from the village. He'd also nearly disemboweled the Hawkage son before Might Guy had shown up, but the man had been lucky all the things considered. He could at least be brought back into fighting form with a short period of recovery and minor skin grafting. As for Kakashi and Kurenai, Itachi did say they were pressed for time. Hopefully a few Yamanaka and medic Nin could deal with the mental trauma of his Tsukuyomi being forced upon them. If not, then they were just unfortunate casualties, and it was an unfortunate means to an end. We shouldn't linger, Itachi said. Even if they've withdrawn to tend to their wounded and dead, it'll be a matter of time before they send someone more specialized to pursue us. They were getting ready to press onwards when they heard someone stop at the mouth of the alley they were in. Itachi had gone out of his way to hastily layer it with an external genjutsu, to give it the illusion of being empty while they readied new transformation disguises. Such a thing was easily peered through by the pair of crimson eyes that stared straight at him. "It's been a long time, Sasuke," Itachi said, devoid of all emotion as he stared at his brother. He'd gotten much bigger since the time he spent chasing after him when they were younger. "Itachi," Sasuke hissed, the word dripping with venom as it left his mouth. The Sharingan, Kasami, seemed slightly intrigued as he turned back to Itachi. "I thought you'd killed off your entire clan." "He wasn't worth mentioning or killing," Itachi said to that. The cold words only served to stir his brother's anger further until his left hand became alight with blue lightning that chirped like 1,000 angry birds, drawing even more attention. So he taught him the Chidori. His naive little brother rushed straight ahead to impale him with it. Die. Itachi felt immensely disappointed. As if something so blatant would work on anyone of his skill level. He caught the assailing hand at the wrist and then drove his knee into Sasuke's abdomen hard enough to knock the breath out of him. The effect was twofold in the end. It forced Sasuke to drop the technique, unable to concentrate from the sudden pain spiking through him. And it dropped him to his knees while his wrist was still in Itachi's grasp, on the verge of vomiting. Itachi then hefted him into the air by his wrist. If he was this weak yet brash enough to leave the village to chase after him, then it was only a matter of time before Sasuke got himself killed. If this is the extent of your power after this long, your hatred hasn't tempered you enough. Perhaps you need a reminder of that day. Itachi's Sharingan morphed into its kaleidoscopic form and true fear entered Sasuke's eyes. He knew what was coming and nothing could stop it. The brief scream for him not do it again died as Sasuke's mind was subjected to 24-hour within his Tsukuyomi and his body went limp. Seeing his eyes were half-lidded and the crimson hue of his Sharingan had faded, Itachi dropped him like that. Sasuke had his headband, so when someone saw him they'd notify the proper authorities and see him back into the Leaf's care. The rogue Uchiha then turned back to his partner. "Let's go, Kisame." "You just gonna leave him like this?" he asked. "It'd be better to kill him now, before he gets in the way again." "I need him alive," Itachi said. "You've noticed my eyesight deteriorating." He did. "I wasn't going to say anything if you weren't." His hatred of me will eventually drive him to become stronger, and to do so he will need to create bonds with his teammates. Such is the nature of the Hidden Leaf's method of training, the fostering of cooperation. When those bonds mature, I'll return to sever them and make him watch. The grief of loss will cause his eyes will flourish up to the point they reach the same level of my own, at which point I will claim them for myself and become able to see once more. "Damn, that's cold," Kasama said with a note of mirth in his voice as Itachi walked past him, towards the mouth of the alley. "I'd just kill someone if I needed to. But you want him to get stronger through grief just so you can crush him and take his eyes out their sockets. Honestly, I kind of feel bad for the kid." Neither one was aware that, clinging to the fringes of his consciousness, Sasuke heard every word of what his brother said. "You have my sincerest apologies that I could not be there to protect you," Rock Lee told Sakura as they sat outside the hospital. It had been an obvious target during the attack, so they had Anbu dedicated to protecting it. However, one sound shinobi had slipped through the net, while the toads dealt with the snakes that sought it out. Lee had gotten himself involved, worsening his injuries in the process. It left him confined to a wheelchair and with his arm in a cast. The medics had been clear that doing that one more time would leave them both permanently disabled. He'd likely never use them again for ordinary life, let alone being a shinobi. "It's fine, Lee," Sakura said, peeling an apple for him. It happened so suddenly that no one was prepared. Besides, apparently I took care of myself this time. In truth, she didn't remember much of what happened that day after the invasion had started because of the hit to her head. Naruto had regaled her with how great a job she did, while Sasuke personally told her she was useful after they'd healed his physical injuries and told him to take it easy until his chakra system corrected itself. That was as high of a compliment she was going to get from him, given his personality. Lee's eyes drifted down to his arm and wheelchair. Even so, I hate that I was not able to participate more. It is a feeling that troubles me like no other, knowing that others are doing everything they can while I can do nothing, she finished for him in her thoughts. She didn't dare say it out loud because there was nothing more painful than having someone else pointing that out to them. Being told how useless she was by that Kunoichi during the Forest of Death, after Lee and the others got hurt defending her, had been the moment she decided to take steps to rectify that. But Lee didn't have that option. His injuries meant that even work in the reserves was unlikely. The Lee clan wasn't very big, but the majority of the men had some role in the shinobi forces. He was likely the first one born with his inability to shape chakra properly and struggled so hard to make it as far as he had, only for him to be nearly crippled. That probably made Lee feel like even more of a failure. Sakura could do nothing to help him as things stood. Not even as his dreams were being crushed before her eyes. She couldn't help the others in the Forest of Death before, and while she finally became capable of doing so for them during the invasion, there was nothing she could do for Lee now. It left her with a bitter feeling in her chest that quickly grew unbearable as she laid the peeled apple and knife down. "I'm going to go get something to drink," Sakura said, rising from her seat. "Do you want anything in particular?" "No, thank you," Lee said. His eyes remained downcast as he reached for the apple with his good hand. Sakura pursed her lips and then walked off. Traversing the hospital corridor, the Kunoichi found herself wondering how many were like Lee. How many were so crippled during the invasion that they could never again fight, after spending years working towards it. She wondered how badly her teammates would take it if they ended up in such a state, incapable of pursuing their dreams. Naruto would be completely lost without the chance of becoming the Hokage, leaving him gloomy and his goofy smile never to be seen again. Sasuke, well, she couldn't even imagine how badly that would hurt him. It was a miracle that they managed to come out so well from what she had been told secondhand. The only lasting injury was that she lost her memories of most of that day, and that was a best-case scenario. It could have been so much worse. That thought was only made more abundant as the medics rushed a gurney down the corridor. She spotted the familiar hair and facial features of the patient being carted off to a room. The words came out in a low, faint-hearted voice. "Sasuke?" An unfeminine groan left Tsunade's lips as she stirred awake. The familiar, unwelcomed acquaintance that was a hangover headache immediately made itself known. It pounded at her skull like it was trying to hammer it open, telling her she knew that it was coming when she downed that last bottle. Her entire body hurt with a throbbing ache that covered every inch. Her tongue and throat were dry, painfully so. She caught the scent of alcohol wafting from her pores, and it only served to make her stomach curl from the abuse she put it through the night before. Even for her, it would take time to treat purging the toxins, soothing the muscles, reinvigorating her body. And she could only do that once she was able to concentrate again, something that would be immensely easier if her head wasn't trying to crack itself open. She made a low, indecipherable noise that her apprentice should recognize well enough to act on. Sure enough, a wet and cold glass was pressed against her cheek. She grabbed it and sat up slowly with her eyes closed, finding the rim of the glass with her lips instead. The fizzling liquid within tickled as it went down her throat, and she sighed. Shizun's special blend would work miracles in minutes to get rid of her headache. After that she could deal with her aches and pains. Then they would go get something to eat before hitting the parlors. "Feel better?" asked a masculine voice. Her blood froze when she recognized it. Tsunade forced her eyes open, briefly catching his figure and features before they felt like they were going to pop out of her head from a stab of pain. She covered them with one hand and used the other to make sure the bed sheet covered her body up to her neck. What happened to Shizune? I sent her off to babysit for a bit since I wanted to have a word with you. Even with her eyes closed, she could feel the weight of his eyes staring at her body as he spoke. Though I admit that I did want a chance to see you in person since it's been a few years now. You're still as beautiful as always, princess. Only you would be interested in seeing a woman in this state, she said, with a note of displeasure in her voice. At least the drink was working well enough that her headache was fading fast. What do you want, Jiraiya? The old man sent me after what happened to the last guy who tried to get a message across to you. I thought that would make it clear that I didn't want to talk to anyone from the Leaf. She opened her eyes a bit to test if the pain was still there. It was tolerable. Apparently the message didn't reach. Jiraiya sighed, rubbing the bridge between his eyes. Princess, have you really not been keeping up with events there? Why would I? She asked. I want nothing to do with the village. The Leaf was invaded during the Chunin exams by Orochimaru, his village and Sand, he said in a slightly lower tone, eyes fixed on her in a focused stare. They even went so far as to bring their Jinchuriki, who went into a full-on tailed beast state. A single, simple question was her response to that. How many died? Not as many as it could have been, he said. I was there with the old man. He managed to get the killing blow, but it cost him an arm in exchange. It looked to be a clean cut by Orochimaru's sword, but the reattachment wasn't as good as it could have been. The arm doesn't work as well as before. The snake got that blade from Ryuchi Cave, didn't he? She fought off a yawn as the remnants of her headache faded enough to begin sorting out the rest of her body. A pale, thin, green glow swaddled her body as she continued. A legendary weapon from one of the 3 Sage regions wouldn't stop at simple damage, so you should have had them checked down to the microscopic level. There's probably cellular and nervous system damage that should have been sorted out before reattachment. He drew up into himself, crossing his arms. We couldn't risk him bleeding out before then. The medics did the best that they could at the time, and it saved his life. Tsunade rolled her eyes and scoffed. And I'm assuming the village is still standing. His long, white hair shifted as he nodded his head. Luckily, the one-tailed raccoon dog was successfully fought and captured by a group of really talented genin. She gave him a flat look, clearly unamused by the perceived joke. It's the truth. His lips curled into a small, proud smile. I gave Minato's boy the toad summoning contract, and he used it to call up Gamabunta when they were in the forest. The resulting battle pretty much leveled the area, but in the end, he and his friends managed to knock out the host by the time we got there. Well, as riveting as that information is, it doesn't explain why you've come for me. The healing glow flared a bit as she looked him in the eyes. Again, what do you want, Jiraiya? I'm here to bring you back, he said firmly. Officially, the old man is only calling Shizune back, but we both know that he wants you back too, and it's only a formality to keep things quiet. Tsunade's eyes narrowed. And if I refuse? Then the next time it's Anbu and myself, he told her bluntly. After the invasion, the old man can't keep turning a blind eye to everything you've done and the reputation you've built up. And we all know that if you run, Shizune will go with you because she's given up her youth to see to it that you're not alone. As callous as you are to the thought of going back to the village, I know that you wouldn't turn Dan's niece a try. In a single, swift motion, she moved to cut him off. Strong, slender fingers grabbed him by the collar and then hoisted him in the air with his back against the wall. Never bring him up again. Undeterred from her glare and posture, he reached up and wrapped his fingers around her wrists. The touch was surprisingly gentle, all things considered. You can't keep running from the ghosts of your past, princess. No matter how hard you drink or how far you go, they'll never stop chasing you. You've had years to figure that out. Why now? Tsunade demanded to know. You know how much it hurts both you and him. So why, after all these years, are you dragging me back to the same place that you're running from? He frowned. I'm not running from anything. With Sensei injured and my reputation in the toilet, I'm betting you're the last viable candidate for the title of Hokage, right? She asked. What excuse are you going to use to run away from it now that Orochimaru is gone? Her question was met with a looming silence as neither one spoke. Her arms grew slack and she lowered him down, their eyes locked. We're the same, Jiraiya. You lost those kids in AIM and your apprentice. I lost my family and the love of my life. You throw yourself into your work to forget about them, and I drink until the pain goes away. So you, of all people, should know what it means for me to go back. The old man knows he doesn't have more than a few years left in him and wants to help you before he takes his final rest, he finally said after a long pause to gather his thoughts. And I tried to give you space since I couldn't do or say anything to help you get over it. But now neither of us has an excuse anymore to keep running. It's time to go back home. Tsunade scoffed. She didn't believe they could help, nor did she want their help after all this time. But she didn't delude herself into thinking that she could elude Anbu forever, especially not when Shizune would follow her and slow her down. The life of a missing nin was hard. Taking refuge in another major village would lead to more bloodshed on her shoulders, and the fact that she was afraid of blood would render her worth little to nothing as emetic advice and counsel could only go so far without the ability to demonstrate. And then there was Jiraiya. He would come after her if she did that to Shizune. He would follow her footsteps with the same relentless zeal he spent hunting down Orochimaru. It wasn't worth it. I don't want to be seen in public, she said. People will have expectations and I don't feel like dealing with them. The old man expected that. We've got it covered. Ben, get out so I can change, she ordered. When he quirked an eye, she crossed her arms. If I was going to run, I'd let you stay so I'd have an excuse to deck you into the next town over. Just wait outside until I've had a chance to clean myself up. Naruto grumbled in frustration, eyes squinted as he spun the water inside of the balloon resting between his palms. His frustration only mounted as the balloon simply shifted with the chakra rather than break. This is impossible. Naruto-kun, called the tall, dark-haired woman that sat across the table from him. So far she had been nice to him, only asking him the occasional question of what living in the village was like since she had been gone for years. In one of her hands was a slice of fruit that she fed to her pet pig, which sat in her lap. What are you doing? The toad guy told me that if I managed to get the water to spin and pop the balloon, I'd learn a technique from the fourth Hokage, he explained. But when I make it spin, all it does is just stretch the balloon out like it's trying to become flatter. I see. She tapped her chin in thought for a moment. The water is being used as a medium to help you pop the exterior, but that won't work if you keep doing it like that. His head snapped up towards her at that. Why not? Because the flow is too stable. She picked up an empty balloon that had yet to be filled and stretched it. The exterior of the balloon is flexible to a certain degree, so it can withstand stretching as long as the flow is stable and moves along a set path. You would have to stretch it far beyond the elasticity of the material in order to break it that way. But that's not how he did it, Naruto said with a frown. His got all lumpy and then popped. I suppose he might have destabilized the flow of chakra to make it more violent. She reached across the table, pressed a finger to his forehead, and closed her eyes. The flow of chakra circulating in your body is spinning clockwise, so you can try to force it rotate counterclockwise inside the balloon, and that should make it less stable. He nodded his head and then gave it a try. The balloon began to shake again, jostling a bit more unstably and threatening to jump out of his hand. That's better, but it wasn't enough to pop it. She extended her hands and cupped the top and bottom of the balloon between her palms. I'll hold it steady this time. You just focus on spinning it as violently as you can. He closed his eyes and focused on doing so, injecting his chakra in from both hands, holding onto the sides of it. The chakra flowed out and mingled with the water as it churned in place. The faster he rotated it, the more it struggled to remain in her palms and pushed against their hands from multiple points like a cricket in a cage, bouncing around and trying to get out. A thought occurred. What if he could make more crickets, more points where his chakra pushed against the balloon it was trapped within? I think I have an idea, but I need to be able to move my palms around. Shizune let go and then stood up to walk away with Tauntaun, taking a seat on the windowsill. If you're that sure of yourself, then we'll keep our distance. We don't want to get wet. With them out of the splash zone, he held the balloon with one hand and began to channel the chakra within it with that hand. Then he brought his palm across the top with the other, moving it at angles while manipulating the chakra within. He made it sharper, transitioning from smooth motions to quick grazes with his palm hover just over the surface as he speared it across. The still flowing chakra bent and pulled more violently as he went faster and came from different directions. It was like multiple crickets were bouncing around inside of the stretching sphere, forcing the elasticity in multiple points rather than a set one. He wove it further, forcing his chakra to spin in multiple directions as fast and hard as he could, until the balloon ruptured and splashed water all over his face and table. "I did it!" he exclaimed, uncaring of the fact that his face was wet and the upper portion of his shirt was soaked. "Congratulations," Shizune said with a small applause, causing him to grin. "You might want to towel off though. You'll catch a cold otherwise." Naruto chuckled for a bit until the door opened. Jiraiya walked in with the woman he saw sleeping on the bed. She looked down at Naruto for a moment longer than a passing glance before she turned her attention to her apprentice. "Pack your things, Shizune," she ordered. "We're going back to the village." The dark-haired woman shot up from her perch with the tiny pig. "Really?" She nodded. "Let's go see the old man." Hiruzen Sarutobi rubbed his eyes with his good hand, feeling the wrinkles shift along the corners as he sighed. 7 men killed, 10 injured, among them his son. Despite all of the precautions he took, it still ended with so many dead just to allow Itachi to keep his cover. Kakashi, Kurenai, and Asuma would hopefully be able to recover, and he had sent the message for the Anbu officers pursuing the 2 Akatsuki members to retreat, which kept the toll down further. But young Sasuke getting word and slipping out of the village to chase after him was unacceptable. No doubt there would be repercussions later on. As much as he wished he could say that no one was at fault, that every party was doing their duty as a shinobi, it felt so hollow as the lives taken and ruined added to the corpses mounted on his back. They just kept piling up. How soon before they would finally bury him? He reached for his pipe, a thin string of smoke coming up from the opening. It soothed his frayed nerves as he inhaled deeply. Basking in the tobacco fumes caressing his lungs, he looked out over the village in mid-reconstruction. Times like these made the hat feel so much heavier than before. Or perhaps the weight was always there, and he was only now realizing how heavy it is. His brush with death had left him far feebler than he would want to admit. The chakra that long permeated his frame was slow to replenish itself, his age becoming more evident. His rumination was interrupted when his aide sent word that Jiraiya had returned with 3 people in tow. That had been quicker than he expected. He extinguished his pipe and then allowed the group to enter. "You can drop the transformations now," he told Naruto, and who he presumed was Tsunade after the doors shut. Sure enough, once the brief puff of smoke vanished, he had all 4 of them in front of him. "Welcome back, all of you. I trust there were no complications on your end." "Nope, it all went smooth," Naruto said. "Not bad for my first mission as a Chunin, huh? Shizune Ni even helped me out on practicing the Rasengan. I've almost got it now." The Hokage briefly glanced towards Jiraiya while Naruto was rubbing the back of his head and smiling. The slight shake of his head told the older man enough. He didn't know about his father. And given the timing, it wouldn't be ideal to tell him either. "As much as I would like to congratulate you on that, I'm afraid there's been a bit of an incident, Naruto." Better to get the bad news out of the way first and from him, rather than let him learn secondhand. Sasuke Uchiha and Kakashi Headache have been hospitalized from an attack. No sooner that the words came out did Naruto's expression shift from elated to shocked and then worried. Just like that, he ran out the door to go check on them, leaving the adults to watching his fleeting back before the door closed shut again. Jiraiya was the first to speak. "Old man, it wasn't because of why we took him in the first place, was it?" He nodded and sighed. "An unfortunate turnout that could have been much worse. That can be discussed later." He walked over to the two women. "I have to admit I was worried you wouldn't come willingly. You both look well." "We sincerely apologize for not responding earlier, Hokage-sama," Shizune said, bowing her head. "If I had known at the time of your last message what would have transpired, I would have tried to convince my lady to allow me to return to help in whatever way I could earlier." Tsunade, on the other hand, looked as unremorseful as possible as she stood there with a slight pout. When she felt the weight of his eyes on her, she extended her hands. "Let me see your arm." He did so, and she gently slid back the sleeve to reveal the scar from where it had been reattached. A gentle green chakra coated the arm, sinking into the flesh. Silence permeated the room for a solid minute as her eyes reflected the glow of chakra. Then it dimmed, and she exhaled softly as she let him go. "Like I thought, there's damage on a cellular level," she said. "They rushed it, but even with my finer control, it would have gone unnoticed if I didn't know what to look for. Unfortunately, even Shizune can't do anything about it now. I consider it the smallest of prices to pay defending my home and correcting my mistakes," he said. "Though it is good to see that your skills in diagnosis haven't diminished after all this time. I trust Jiraiya told you why I wanted you back." Her lips pursed, and she crossed her arms. "You want to help me, or something like that, right? Call it righting past wrongs if you must," he said as he made his way back over to his seat. "You should not have been left alone with your grief for as long as you had been. There's so much that you could have done over the years that were hampered because I didn't make more of an effort, so I wish to correct that with the time I have left." "I don't want it to be public knowledge that I'm here," she said. "That's fine for now." He'd already made arrangements with that in mind. "It'll take time, but everyone will be better for it. But first, I need to ask if there's another matter you and Shizune can help me with." Stupid, I'm so stupid, Naruto thought to himself as he bounded over the rooftops. He had been so elated at completing his first mission as a Chunin and nearly getting the Rasengan down. Yet, while he was doing that, someone hurt his teammate and sensei. Who was it? That question lingered in the back of his mind as he moved faster. Sasuke wasn't weak. They'd worked together to take down Gaara, who they knew wasn't a pushover. And Kakashi definitely could handle himself, he'd seen that. So who was it that could have done this to both of them? "Boss." Naruto paused when he heard the familiar voice from down on the street. It was Konohamaru and his little friends. There were bright smiles on their face as they waved towards him with both hands. "I'll play with you later, Konohamaru," Naruto yelled. "I need to get to the hospital." He looked a bit upset, which made sense since Naruto hadn't been around with him a lot between training and the mission. But Naruto was in a hurry. He would make time for the kid later on. Naruto also knew that there was paperwork and a debriefing that needed to be done post-mission, but his body moved on its own. So much for trying to be a professional after becoming a Chunin. He hoped that the old man wouldn't be pissed about that. When he reached the hospital, he went up to the desk and asked what rooms they were in. The person manning the station checked the list to see he was one of the allowed visitors, probably because he was in the team, and then gave him the 2-room addresses. Naruto decided to visit Sasuke's first since he was closer. Sakura was there, sitting in front of the window as a breeze blew through the room. Her reddened eyes shifted from Sasuke, who was lying still beneath the sheets with a slight frown on his face, towards him. They briefly widened in surprise before she began to move. The sight still made his stomach fall. Naruto entered the room and shut the door. "Sakura, I'm so." He didn't get the words out. Not before Sakura circled around the bed and embraced him in a hug. It took a second before he registered her body was shaking too. "What's wrong?" he asked. "You weren't here," she said softly, between sniffling fits. "No matter how hard I looked, I couldn't find you. No one knew where you were, and I thought something bad happened to you too." Naruto brought his arms to the small of her back to return her embrace. He carefully chose his next words as he remembered the nature of the mission. "I was out with one of the other jounin for an assignment. I can't tell you any more than that. I want to, but it's the old man's orders." Sakura was slow to pull away and wipe her tears with her thumbs. Teammates or not, she knew that if he really was ordered to keep silent on it, then it wouldn't be right to push that any further. "But you're okay, right?" "I'm fine," he said. "Good." She turned back to Sasuke. "Because I'm tired of watching the people I care about keep getting hurt, Naruto. Sasuke, Kakashi-sensei, and Kurenai-sensei ended up like this about 2 days ago, and Ino mentioned that Asuma-sensei got hurt too." That was unnerving. He imagined that Kiba was ready to go hunting for blood and only a lack of information was holding Shino back. And while he didn't know Asuma all that well, he was still the old man and Konohamaru's family. They had to be taking it hard too. Who did it? "I don't know. The only people who saw the attack aren't saying anything about it, Hokage's orders. But from what I can figure out, whoever did this used a genjutsu strong enough to leave 3 of them like this. Ino's sensei was injured physically, so there had to be 2 people at least." She shook her head. "Still, it doesn't make sense. Kurenai-sensei is a master of genjutsu and both Sasuke and Kakashi have the Sharingan. Yet whoever did this to them got them all so easily that it's scary. So someone hit them with a genjutsu so hard that it put them in the hospital?" He grimaced at that. "I know that they can be used to create illusions, but from how you put it, this is something else entirely. Is that even possible?" "When she was teaching me, Kurenai-sensei mentioned that a strong enough genjutsu can cause physical damage to the body," Sakura said. "She mentioned there was a clan in Konoha that had a bloodline limit that could do it once upon a time, using illusions so powerful that they caused the brain to reflect the damage onto their body. But this is different. It caused psychological damage, the sort of thing that strains the mind and can shatter it into pieces." "Will they wake up?" he asked cautiously. "Can't they send someone from Ino's clan to do something? They specialize in that, right?" "I asked her, but she said that they can't send Yamanaka into someone's mind if they've undergone a certain level of psychological stress for medical reasons. It can do more harm than good, so they have to find someone who can heal that sort of thing or wait until they wake up on their own." Sakura brought her hands up to her hair, fingers tensed from the sheer frustration. "Lee, Sasuke, Kakashi-sensei, Kurenai-sensei, I'm tired of watching all the people who helped me end up like this, Naruto." Naruto didn't say anything to that. He understood it to some extent, like when Oruka took a giant shuriken in the back for him, and when Karin ended up being covered in markings from the cursed seal on her. But he couldn't advise her on what to do. That was when the door opened and 2 people stepped in. One of them was Shizune, who pressed a finger to her mouth. The other was a woman with long, dark hair that fell down her back, the transformation that Tsunade put on herself. She touched Sasuke's forehead, and her fingers glowed with a soft light. Sasuke began to stir away, dark eyes fluttering open for a moment. Then his eyes closed and his head lolled. His breathing shifted, leaving his chest to rise and fall a lot more noticeably than before. "Let him sleep," Shizune told the pair as the disguised Tsunade promptly walked out of the room. "Dealing with the psychological damage is one thing, but his mind needs rest to fully heal." "What about Kakashi-sensei and others?" he asked. "She's going to help them now." She crouched down to place a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Just keep the fact that we're here a secret, okay? And remember to go to do the debriefing with the Hokage." He nodded as she rose to her feet again, and then walked out of the room. That left Naruto and Sakura alone again. The latter was looking at Sasuke's sleeping face, which had taken on a more placid expression. Sakura sighed in relief at the sight. "Thank you, Naruto," Sakura said after a pause. "I heard what she said, so I won't pry. But I know you had something to do with it, so thank you. I'm just glad that they helped." He rubbed the back of his neck in thought. Shizune had been helping him with his technique during their trip back, and she seemed nice. But the other woman had been cold and curt to even Jiraiya. He guessed the old man had a way of making her help easily enough. Still, if they could help Kakashi and Karin, then that would be enough for him. "I'd better go back to the Hokage's tower. See you later?" "Sure," Sakura said. 7-year-old Karin hummed as she sat in a field of flowers that reached as far as her eyes could see. In her hands was a crown that was slowly being woven to fit on her head. Another pair, one made of yellow flowers and one made of red, laid next to her. She couldn't recall why or when she made them, but looking at them pulled at her heart in a good way. Her flower weaving was brought to an end when a man with blonde hair appeared in the air in front of her. He looked around for a moment before locking eyes with her. Then he touched down on the field. She backed away from the tall stranger. "Who are you?" "Miss Uzumaki, I need your whole attention," he said. "Though I hate to pull you from your happy place, the Hokage has given me orders to carry out, and you should be conscious enough to register why I am here." In an instant gone was the 7-year-old innocent child. In her place was the real Karin, the spy and traitor to 3 villages instead of 1. "What's going on?" "You have been in a medical coma since the day you were retrieved from the forest after the invasion," he explained. "In order to seal away the cursed mark on you, we need to wake you so that it can proceed. However, I've been told that the process will be excruciating and came to warn you beforehand so that you may brace yourself." His words brought to mind that event. She recalled stopping Naruto from killing Sakura, telling them where Sasuke was located. And then Naruto bit into her. "What happened to Naruto?" she asked. "Naruto Uzumaki, is he okay? He should have been in the forest as well." "I am not personally familiar with that individual, but all the genin that were in the location we retrieved you from were secured, and the battle with the Jinchuriki had no causalities." She exhaled audibly at that. If something had happened to him, she wouldn't have been able to calm down. "Good, good. Getting back to the matter at hand, you are on the verge of waking up, so they are beginning the sealing process. Due to the nature of the seal, there will be a backlash from the attempt, and it will be dependent on your own willpower. You need to focus your mind on something to aid with the sealing process." "Like what?" "Some sort of image or visualization to aid you," he said. "A person or object you can cling to and will only be able to obtain should the sealing work. You need to use it as an anchor for the technique to work." Okay, that sounds simple enough. All she needed to do was think of something she could hold onto if she remained free of the cursed mark. "I should be able to manage that much. Then I will take my leave." He floated into the air again and then faded away, leaving her alone. Karin sat back down in the field of flowers and looked down to the flower crowns that came in pink, red, and yellow. The colors that her younger self chose made so much more sense now that she was aware of it. The pink would be hers for obvious reasons, young and able to pass as a lighter shade of red, which was her mother's hair color. The yellow had to be Naruto's then, that lovable goofball she fell in love with. He was probably the only good thing in her life at the moment, waiting for her in the waking world. She grabbed his flower crown and held it close to her heart. The change happened abruptly after that. All of the vivid hues of the flowers dulled, going from an entire spectrum of bright colors to ink black. The clear and sunny sky was suddenly filled with storm clouds laden with tendrils of Stygian lightning. Thorned vines snaked from the ground and then coiled around her body from every conceivable angle, the thorns piercing her flesh like poisoned nails that brought with them an indescribable pain. She screamed as she braced the flower crown tighter, the sole spot of color in the otherwise pitch-dark world. A lingering, agonizing ache made itself known to Karin as she slowly stirred awake in a room unfamiliar to her. Everything hurt at the moment, even her fingers grasping for something that wasn't there. But she had experienced far worse from the seal of subjugation, leaving her grateful that its markings no longer covered her body. She took a moment to just breathe, letting the aches settle a bit. Then she sat up, or at least she tried to. Her hands were bound to the railing of the medical bed. They were the sort of straps that Orochimaru and Kabuto used to keep subjects pinned down so they could operate on them, usually after drugging them if it didn't compromise the purpose of the procedure. Panic began to set in at the thought that they had claimed her, and she activated her mind's eye. Numerous chakra signatures were close to her, some layered in shells and veils of yin chakra to hide themselves. One had an intricate mesh of medically refined yang chakra covering their body in a pattern that she didn't think was possible, as if threading each cell of her body individually while connected to a point on her forehead. Still, she recognized most of the signatures to an extent. One of them was the Hokage and the other was Gamma, so she wasn't back in a hidden sound base. And sending her awareness across the village further, she picked up the warm and sunny chakra belonging to the boy she had grown soothingly close to. Karin let loose a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. She relaxed, giving her mind enough time to remember everything that happened from the invasion to the man visiting her happy place. That was when the door to the room opened. Gamma entered, wearing the Hokage's appearance in a transformation. The disguise was flawless on the surface, from the height and frame of the body to the wrinkles on his face. Even that stern look that he was wearing seemed natural. "Can you speak?" "Yes, Gamma-san," Karin said. He paused for a moment. Then he sighed, dropping the disguise to reveal his appearance as a man with big, white hair. "The name's Jiraiya, for the record, and it's actually a bit frightening how easily you saw through that. I can sense the Hokage's chakra signature on the other side of the mirror with someone else," she said. "It's a lot less than when I was last awake, but I recognize it. That's the one thing you can't change, even if your disguise looks perfect." He looked towards the one-way mirror where the Hokage was. "Huh? And who else can you sense?" "There are 5 signatures besides yours and his that are close to me. 2 are in the room with him, 1 in a hidden panel above this room, 1 in a compartment below my bed, and 1 in the corner under a concealment technique." She gestured her head to the corner of the room. "That one I recognize as the one who watched over me the most often when I was staying at the inn." "That's quite a gift you've got at your age," he said, sounding slightly intrigued. "Chakra sensing usually takes a long time to refine. Even then, there's usually a bloodline or medium of some kind, like a seal or device." "It was a fluke I was born with," she said. "It used to be on all the time until my home was attacked, and I started being able to turn it on and off. I wasn't lying when I said that happened to the Hokage. I just left out that Orochimaru took an interest in me because of my hair and killed the men who were trying to take me instead." "A lie of omission is still a lie," he pointed out. "If we had known ahead of time about his other agent, Kabuto Yakushi, a lot of needless deaths could have been avoided. Why didn't you tell anyone? If you were in my shoes, and it wasn't your home that was attacked, would you have done it?" she asked. "I've seen what grass does with spies, and Orochimaru told me about your interrogation methods. Would you really have offered me the chance to stay in the village if I confessed everything?" "Yes," he said, after a moment of thought. "We've already done it for one of his former agents. She was younger than you when we found her abandoned by him." Her throat felt dry at hearing that. "Then why couldn't you have found me sooner, before he found me? Maybe then I could have had a happy life." A slight grimace formed on his face at that. "We can't be everywhere. Believe me, I've seen my share of orphans that deserved better than they got. It's an unfortunate fact, especially during wartime." "I get that." She shook her head slowly. "It was bad luck that my home was destroyed, and then the one who saved me from being sold off was someone who was your worst enemy. It was good luck that Naruto decided to save me instead of someone else, showing me I had family." Luck and timing, those are what determines how things play out a lot of the time. We're getting off track, Jiraiya decided. Despite what Orochimaru told you, we're willing to settle for talking at present. She shrugged. There's no reason for me to hide anything anymore. What do you want to know? What made you decide to change your plans? He asked. Naruto's report mentioned that you had taken Byakko and fled before the invasion began. He said that you were supposed to capture him but wouldn't. I didn't want him to suffer, she said. Naruto has a way of warming into your heart by being so trusting and sweet despite everything that he's been through. Kabuto gave me the details about his life. They're in the seal if you want to see. He nodded. I already managed to get that out when I sealed the cursed mark. It was a lot more detailed than we liked. But go on. She fought off a yawn before she continued. I had a pretty good idea what they were going to do to Naruto if I went through with it, and decided I wasn't going to put him through that. But I knew the consequences of spying, so I didn't say anything. Since it was made clear that failure would get me punished as well, there was no home for me to go to either. So you decided to run, he guessed? Her red hair swayed as she nodded. I figured I'd run when I got the chance during the chaos. I'd dye my hair, suppress my chakra, and start over somewhere else. I wanted Naruto to come with me, but I understood he loved this village too much to even consider it. It was just easier to disappear. With Byakko, that would have been possible. He crossed his arms. But I'm guessing you felt Naruto's chakra on the way out? He entered my sensing range with several sound shinobi after, she said. Think about it. Naruto, a genin for a few months, against hidden sound agents, fully grown men trained to kill by Orochimaru and likely equipped to capture him. I couldn't just run away, and while his group did well in fending them off, that last would have gotten him if I hadn't. Karin trailed off as she yawned. I'm sorry, she said. I'm still a bit tired, but that's the gist of why I came back. What else do you want to know? There was a tap on the glass before he could ask anything else. It was a signal of some kind. He nodded to it and then turned back to her. Get some rest, he said firmly. We'll talk later. If you're going to send me back to grass after this is over, tell Naruto there was a complication in sealing the cursed mark and I died, she said abruptly. They'll kill me anyway, and I don't want him to feel badly about the village when he loves it so much. Grass has turned you over to the Leaf's custody with everything that's happened, so you don't have to worry about being sent back. He left the room with that said. Karin laid her head down against the pillow and closed her eyes. Her mind's eye focused on Naruto's chakra in the distance. He was safe and sound after all of that, which was the best she could hope for. Yet, chances were they'd never let her see him again, if he wanted to see her again, given everything she'd done. Tears began to trickle down from the corners of her eyes at the thought, only to stop when she fell back asleep. Back to the dreams that comforted her where reality wouldn't. Sorry about before, Naruto said to Hiruzen Sarutobi in regards to running off when he learned of his teammate's fate. It was a short time after Jiraiya's brief questioning with Miss Uzumaki. He had called it off after that because it had given him an idea on her sensory abilities and how to deal with her. The rest of the information of value had already been obtained while she slept, courtesy of the Yamanaka clan, not that she needed to know that. I understand, Naruto, he said. Just don't make a habit of it. You do have to live up to the standards of being a chunin now that I'm lifting the restriction of keeping quiet on the subject. The boy nodded. Now then, we have a few things to discuss regarding your promotion. Kakashi, once he has recovered, will take in a third member to replace your spot. Your training will be with Jiraiya instead. I speak from personal experience when I say that he has a habit of bringing out the potential in his students. That much was certain. There were fewer he could entrust to the task either way. Jiraiya had the key to the seal housing the nine-tailed fox. There was also the fact that there was a chain to be linked to it. Sarutobi had been trained by the first and second Hokages before becoming the third. He had trained Jiraiya, who had trained not only the fourth, but was experienced in his own right and on the verge of becoming the fifth preferably as soon as Naruto's training was up to par. Retirement was looking good right about now. In terms of missions you will be allowed to take, they will be low C rank for the time being, he continued. After all, you have less than a year's experience as a shinobi, and given how chaotic the mission to Wave was, I think you need more time to acclimate to standard ones. That mission had gotten out of hand in a lot of ways. It could have been handled better on all accounts, even if things ended smoothly enough with a bridge named after him. That was another mark on the boy's record in his favor. In addition, I would like for you to spend some time talking to Gaara of the desert. That boy had been quiet and almost non-responsive since they'd captured him. I'm hoping that as fellow Jinchuriki you will come to something of an accord. Naruto nodded his head. I've been wanting to talk to him myself, now that the fighting is over. I imagine so, but what you learn will no doubt be unpleasant from what we've gathered from his siblings. He wouldn't question Rasa's methods since each village has its own way after all. But he certainly didn't see the benefits of how he'd chosen to train the boy. Lastly, there's the matter of Karin Uzumaki. Just like that, the air became thick with tension. Naruto stilled, his breath caught in his chest. What's going to happen to her? Her circumstances are unique, Naruto. The Hokage sighed. She has a long road ahead of her for everything that has happened, even if she didn't wish for them. She will be under observation and be restricted in the actions she can take for a prolonged period, without a doubt. Naruto trembled in place as he trailed off. The older man imagined he was bristling with the urge to plead for him to show her leniency if he gave too harsh a decision. The fact that he had remained so composed when he saw her the first time was another testament to his growth compared to before he graduated. However, we can sympathize with her situation and are willing to give her a chance, he continued. If she behaves herself and shows that she can grow to love the village as you do, we'll give her a home here. Her records will be sealed to keep her part in things quiet so that she won't be ostracized for it. All the tension in Naruto's body melted at that. Thanks, Hokage sir. It'll take him some time to get used to having to say that, won't it? He fought off the urge to chuckle a bit before sighing. An Anbu officer will escort you to her location when she wakes. Get some rest until then. He left out after that, no doubt eager to wait up until the wee hours of the morning now that night had begun to fall. I hope for both their sakes this works out well, Sarutobi said to the invisible figure in the corner of the room. Otherwise, it may hurt them more in the end. It's for the best, old man, Jiraiya said as he dropped the transparency technique he developed. It might be because I'm a bit nostalgic, but her situation reminds me a lot of Nagato and the others. The AIM orphans he'd taken care of, and the boy who developed the Rinnegan, from what Jiraiya had told him. In all honesty, Sarutobi felt that Jiraiya should have brought them back to the village for safekeeping. But Jiraiya didn't on the grounds that Nagato had told him that his parents had been killed by shinobi of the Leaf, an unfortunate accident but not uncommon during wartime. So he trained and left them to their own devices. Then the last he'd heard they died by Hanzo's hands. Jiraiya grieved as he always did, throwing himself into his work. The same thing happened later on, with Minato's death. Sarutobi felt that this was his way of trying to prevent it from happening again. The third time should be the charm, right? I take it you have someone in mind for watching her? Jiraiya asked. You can't let her live in that place. He nodded. I'll have the files sent over to that person in the morning. She should be recovering as well, and they have a lot in common, regardless of the tension that will be involved. Naruto had been on the verge of falling asleep when there was a knock on his door. The Anbu officer that had brought him before had come again, with word that Karin had woken up. Just like that, all his exhaustion faded away and a surge of energy coursed through him as she carried him through the dizzying motions back to the secure location. He took a deep breath as he stood outside of the door to her room, guarding by two Anbu officers he didn't recognize. Hesitation lingered in his chest and weighed down his feet when he recalled the day of the invasion and her confession. He took a moment to just breathe again, gathered his courage into his limbs, and opened the door. Karin was inside. She was sitting up in the bed with her hands in her lap, a band of slightly discolored flesh to show where her wrists had been bound before by the straps that were loose on the railing of the bed. Her head was down, her hair shadowing her face as though she wanted to hide her eyes from him. "You came to see me," Karin said softly, without looking up. "Despite everything that's happened. Why?" "I missed you," he said sincerely as he walked closer. "Are you okay now?" "As fine as I can be given everything that happened. They haven't tortured me or anything, which makes it better than how it would have been anywhere else." "Of course they wouldn't torture you." He tried to get a look at her face, but she turned her head away from him. "You didn't do anything wrong." Her fingers clenched the sheet in her lap. "We both know I did." "You didn't have a choice." He tried to reach out and set his hand on hers, but she pulled her hands back and pressed them against her chest. His shoulders sagged. "Will you at least look at me?" "I don't deserve to," she said with a hitch in her voice. If I had known they would have shown me mercy, then I would have said something. But I didn't, Naruto, and look what happened." Everything turned out okay, though. That's what matters. He rubbed the back of his neck uncomfortably at the resulting silence. This wasn't how he imagined the talk going. Maybe he should try bringing up what she said before she fled. "Karin, about what you said to my shadow clone." "Forget it." She shook her head violently, her eyes screwed shut. "I shouldn't have said anything. I just wanted to get it off my chest, to know how you'd react before I moved on. But I didn't know you'd get the memories." He felt a weight in his chest at her reaction. "Did you not mean it?" "I meant it, but—" She curled up into herself, bracing her shoulders with her arms trembling. "You're still going to be the Hokage someday, aren't you?" He frowned. "Yeah, I'm a Chunin now." "Then it'll look bad if you're seen associating with a former spy that worked for Orochimaru," she said. "I've caused enough problems for you as is. Besides, I'm sure they won't let me stay in the village after they've learned all they can. Either they'll send me to prison or cut me loose, and I'll be alone again." "You're wrong." He cupped her trembling hands in his own and held them tight so she couldn't break away. "The old man told me that you could stay. He said that if you're really honest about it and do what they say, they'll seal the records and keep quiet so that you can stay here with me. You can have a home and family." Karin's entire body tensed at that, and her head rose. Her eyes were glistening wet, on the verge of tears. "You're not lying?" He shook his head. "The old man wants to give you a chance because you didn't have a choice. And I owe you so much for everything you've done. I want you to stay here with me in the village. Don't you want that too?" She moved her head closer to his body. "I'll do whatever they say if that's the case. I promise. Just don't abandon me, or I won't have anything left. Okay?" "I promise," he said as he pulled her into a hug. "I won't abandon you." "Thank you, Naruto," Karin said as she wrapped her arms around his back. "I'm so glad I met you. I really am." "Me too." In truth, he still wanted to talk about her feelings and what she had said back then. But it could wait until she had settled down. By then, maybe he'd have a solid answer on how to respond to her feelings properly. So they stayed like that, silently embracing one another until the allotted time was up. Jiraiya sat with his legs crossed in front of his new student, who was out like a light with his head slouching forward. In hindsight, it may have been a miscalculation to try and have Naruto sit down patiently in the middle of an empty field and meditate on his surroundings. Though he had his moments of insightfulness and maturity, boredom was something that had to be taken into account. He was, after all, a child. It was fine for now, though. While he wanted the boy to familiarize himself with the practice for when the toads inevitably taught him how to achieve Sage Mode, it wouldn't be any time soon. His body was too underdeveloped for that, and he had yet to hit puberty. Getting him used to it right now would simply boast better results later. And Naruto did manage to get a workaround for the Rasengan that Jiraiya hadn't thought of. He mentioned it was thanks to Shizune's help the first time that he got the idea. By using a clone to handle the containment while he handled the rotation and the power, he bypassed the most difficult step. He'd need to learn to do so without a clone eventually, but it was fine for now as well. They had plenty of time before Jiraiya had to take the hat, though he was still hesitant to take on the role of the Hokage and certainly wasn't in a rush. He could probably buy a few years' time to train Naruto. Akatsuki was still out there after all, and the Leaf would be a prime target now that it had 2 Jinchuriki in its custody. There was no telling when they would surface again, but they had to be dealt with one way or another. Those thoughts out of the way, the Toad Sage clapped his hands hard. The sound promptly snapped Naruto awake. He defaulted to a sheepish expression after realizing what happened. Sorry about that," he said, rubbing the back of his head. "It was just too quiet." "Something to work on in the future," Jiraiya told him. Then he pulled out a sheet of square paper, similar to that one would use when folding origami. "For now, let's try and figure out where you stand with elemental affinity. You know the cycle of overcoming, right?" Naruto nodded. "It's like a game of Jankenpo. Wind insulates lightning, lightning pierces earth, earth dams water, water quenches fire, and fire consumes wind. That's why Sasuke managed to get through the sand shield Gaara was using with lightning, rather than using a fire technique like normal or explosives." Jiraiya nodded. "Chidori isn't a rank technique. There's nearly no earth techniques that can outright stop it. Headache taught him it specifically because his own experiences during war utilized it as such. However, that only applies if the techniques are the same level. A D-rank water technique will be evaporated by a B-rank fire technique and so on. And if 2 techniques with the same element but different ranks clash, the weakest will be consumed and make the stronger one even more powerful. There were also cases where you can use one technique to purposely empower another, such as feeding wind into fire to strengthen in. But when 2 different shinobi did so, the combined technique ran the risk of going out of control if they weren't used to it. Such actions had to properly coordinated or practiced ahead of time. He handed over the sheet to Naruto. "Try injecting chakra into it. If you're aligned with fire, the paper will burn to ashes. Wind will make it split in 2, lightning will make it crinkle, earth will crumble to dust, and water will soak it. If you lean to yang more heavily than anything, it'll swell somewhat, and if it's yin, then it will cause a marking to appear." Naruto closed his eyes and channeled his chakra into it. The paper split into 2 halves almost immediately. Wind it was. "Having a wind affinity right off the bat is rare," Jiraiya said. "With it, you can either unleash a squall to buffet your enemies or a blade that can cleave them to pieces. With refining, you can lace it with dust or sand to erode away everything in your path, or generate a compressed sphere of air that devastates entire landmasses. Watch my hands and I'll show you." When Naruto got to his feet and started staring at him, Jiraiya gathered and compressed his wind chakra onto the palms of his hands. He kept the amount rather minuscule, not thick enough to appear visible, or even distort the air around his hands before he clapped them together. The impact dispersed the chakra and sent a gale out that made Naruto stagger back a few steps before falling on his rear, rather than send him feet overhead a few meters away. "That was a technique known as the Gale Palm, though I half-heartedly put effort into," he explained. "It works by compressing wind chakra and then releasing it with a simple clap, using chakra control to direct it to an extent. If I had used the external air as a medium and laced it with sharpened chakra, then it would have been akin to sending out blades to slice into your skin, a wind scythe technique. Likewise, if I had used my lungs and exhaled then, depending on my chakra control and reserves, it would have created a powerful gust of wind that could have blown over a house. Those are all C-rank techniques at that, and while not high in terms of power, you don't see them coming until it's too late." So basically what Gaara did while transformed and what his sister did during the preliminaries, Naruto said, getting back to his feet. "How do I start?" Jiraiya tapped his chin in thought. The reason most shinobi aren't taught elemental techniques until chunin outside of clans is because freshly minted genin are often young and lack maturity. They'll try a technique in haste and end up hurting themselves. If he improperly molded wind chakra, it would very likely cut him apart from the inside out. And unlike Nagato, Naruto didn't have the luxury of the Rinnegan. After a moment of thought, he decided, "We'll start with being able to refine your base chakra externally. We can use leaves for now, since being able to cut them with your chakra alone will likely suffice for a minor technique. It's only when you need something really devastating that you'll have to move up to something harder to cut." "Anko Mitarashi reporting for duty," Anko said, standing at attention the moment she entered the Hokage's office. She had received a file detailing an assignment that she was to undertake from an Anbu officer this morning and had now come at the appointed time. "How are you feeling?" the Hokage asked. The moment that Orochimaru had been killed, her cursed mark flared up briefly while she was helping to evacuate civilians. The seal around it had been reinforced since then, but the effort had been taxing on her chakra system due to the fact that she'd had her cursed mark for over a decade now. "There are some slight fluctuations and imbalances in my chakra from the last flare-up," she admitted. "But I can manage the assignment you had in mind." "Are you certain?" he asked. "You can speak freely against it if you wish." Anko's lips briefly pursed, forming a thin line. "In all honesty, I can't say that I can be entirely unbiased with overseeing her. Her ability makes her a major security risk, and she squandered your generosity by leaving us in the dark about his agents." Left unsaid was that she reminded Anko of how she used to be as a child. That was something of an old shame for her, having been an admirer of Orochimaru in her youth. She drank in everything he had to teach her until he used her as an experiment for the cursed seal of heaven. Then he'd abandoned her in the land of the sea. "Shaking off those memories," she continued. "At the same time, I can somewhat empathize with her situation, and I'm the best suited to see if she's really committed to a second chance over a period of long-term observation. I will try to remain as unbiased as I can." The Hokage leaned back in his chair and sighed. "I know that you'll challenge her because she reminds you of the past, meaning you'll take into consideration all the hardships you faced and be fair towards her by holding her up to the same standards. If she can stand up to all of that for the sake of remaining in the village, we'll know for certain how strong her ties are, and the leaf will grow because of it." There was no denying that the abilities Anko read on the files would make her useful, which was probably the reason Orochimaru took an interest in her in the first place. He had a habit of cherry-picking those who were talented or gifted. "I shall do my best to then." "Very well," he said. "I also understand that your living quarters are rather small, so I have provided a larger home for you to utilize for the duration of the assignment. So long as she follows the guidelines that have been drafted to gain a full understanding of her abilities, you may oversee her how you see fit." "Thank you, sir." After the training session finished, Naruto found himself in yet another secure location. It was a 2-story facility located outside of the village proper. Gaara was being held here, likely in the event that the inhibitor seals failed and the one-tailed raccoon dog was unleashed again. A small part of him wondered for a brief moment if it had been meant to house him at one point as well. But he brushed that line of thinking away. The old man was always nice and had never treated him in the same manner that Gaara's father did according to the files anyway. That isn't to say that the building was inhospitable. The structure honestly looked rather homely if you disregarded the lack of windows, and the Anbu officers that he could actually spot, and the fact that there were probably traps as well, given how he had been firmly warned on the way in to follow a set path and not deviate. Naruto knocked on the door of the room that was currently in use by Gaara. He had been informed ahead of time that Naruto would be arriving, and the door was already unlocked. But it never hurt to be courteous. "The door is unlocked," came through the other side. Naruto opened it to find Gaara was sitting down in a chair in the center of the room, at one end of a round table that was at least 2 arms lengths apart. Other than another chair and light, The room was rather Spartan. Naruto sat down on the opposite end. There was a lingering silence in the air as he tried to find an appropriate way to start the conversation. He had given the subject a great deal of thought, taking into consideration any hostilities that may be present for being a large part of why Gaara was trapped in the facility. Hi, it wasn't perfect, but it was all he had for an opener. For his part, Gaara mostly sat there with his arms crossed. The borderline unblinking and placid expression he had when not on the verge of madness or enraged left him hard to read. He just stared at Naruto for a moment of prolonged silence before saying, "I find it hard to believe you also host a demon within you." Naruto didn't deny it. He specifically had clearance to tell him because it could be used as a point in this instance to create some sort of link between them. But Gaara shouldn't have known that on his own. How'd you guess? While I allowed the demon within me to act freely, the burden it places on me is lifted. I become able to see the world as it does through me, hear its inner thoughts, and feel how it does. It recognized the chakra that you used as that of its own kind. Naruto filed that bit of information away for later and said, "I had the nine-tailed fox sealed inside of me the day I was born, just like you." "That is what I do not understand," he said. "If we were the same, I would not be here right now. You would not have reached out and caught me as I fell in an attempt to save me." "I fought to stop you from hurting anyone else," Naruto said. "But that was it. There was no need to let you die once you couldn't fight back. Letting you fall to your death in that case would have been the same as killing you. That should never be done on a whim, out of hatred or fear." "You are too soft," Gaara said firmly, as if a fact. "If our positions were swapped, I would have done so immediately. Leaving those who oppose you alive will only leave you open to being killed later on." Naruto frowned. That was such a dark way of looking at things. "Is that why you tried to kill Lee when he couldn't fight back? Because you were afraid he'd come after you again?" "The stronger the opponent, the greater the threat they may be to me," Gaara said. "He was strong enough to break through my defenses. Leaving him alive, even crippled, would allow him to seek vengeance one day. Only by eliminating everyone else will there be no one that can threaten my existence." "Isn't that a lonely way to live?" Naruto asked. "I mean, if you kill everyone else because you feel threatened, then who else will be left to stand by you?" "No one has stood by me since I was a child," he said. "Everyone feared me because of what I was. They ran and left me alone. And then the one person who showed me kindness betrayed me and tried to take my life. If we truly are similar, then you should have experienced something similar, correct?" "Yeah, actually," Naruto said, after taking a moment to just process that. "The day I was born, the nine-tailed fox went on a rampage and killed a lot of people before they put it into me. I grew up without knowing why everyone hated me until a few months ago, when one of my teachers told me while trying to kill me." "Then why do you not live for only yourself as I have?" "Because someone saved me," Naruto said. "Iruka-sensei's parents were killed by the nine-tailed fox, but he still came to like me enough that he was willing to take a hit that would have seriously injured me. If that hadn't happened, I think that I would have ended up giving up on people too. Had Iruka not been there, Mizuki would have seriously injured him to take the scroll. The fox wouldn't let him die so easily, Naruto knew that now. But the betrayal after he put his trust in that man would have very likely been the final time he trusted in someone else. He would have given in to his anger and let the fox's influence take hold, becoming no different than Gaara. One person made all the difference," Naruto continued. "If he hadn't been there, I would have probably decided to live like you chose to. But because Iruka-sensei was there, I decided to keep trying to get others to accept me like he does. The people who cheered me on during my match, my teammates, Karin, Tuchai, and Iame, they're proof that I succeeded in the end." For the first time since their discussion began, Gaara averted his eyes from Naruto. The only inkling into what was going through his mind was the soft words that followed. "You were fortunate." "Yeah, I was," Naruto admitted. It makes me happy, but I'm afraid that one day I'll lose those people who I managed to connect with. That thought scares me more than anything, and it makes my heart ache just thinking about it. Gaara's eyes turned towards him yet again. Only this time there was a faint recognition within them, an understanding of what it truly meant to feel that sort of pain. And yet you still insist on caring for them, despite the pain that will follow when you lose them. I'd rather have those people who can accept me in my life rather than not at all, and I can extend the time I have with them by becoming strong enough to protect them, Naruto said. What about you, Gaara? Were you happy living for only yourself? The Jinchuriki of the Sand said nothing to that. Just the same, Naruto didn't press him on it. It wouldn't help things. I know the pain you've been through as a Jinchuriki, being hated and ignored for reasons beyond your control. But I also know that people can change for the better. That's why, despite the fact that you tried to take my friends from me and tried to kill me, I want to try and make things better for you by being the person that makes a difference in your life. The corners of Gaara's lips pulled back slightly, stretching into a small frown. And how do you plan on doing that? I'm going to be your friend, Naruto said, extending his arm across the table. I do have certain restrictions on what I can do with you because of everything that's happened. But we can just hang out and talk, or try new foods or games or stuff like that. Gaara stared at his hand for a pregnant pause. Then he extended his own and gingerly placed into Naruto's. Just like that, the two Jinchuriki shook hands. Here you go, Ayam said as she handed off a bowl of one of their most expensive ramen dishes to Naruto. It was her way of congratulating him on his promotion to Chunin, a fact that was irrefutable given that he now wore his flak jacket over his normal jumpsuit while Tuchai was away. Thanks, Ayam ni, Naruto said over the sound of bubbling broth, the clinking chopsticks on ceramic, and the slurping of noodles that filled the air of the Ikaraku. His cerulean eyes couldn't help but glimmer as he stared down at the work of art. The thick, rich scent coming off of it nearly left him drooling. You're too good to me. Konohamaru, Mogi, and Udon were sitting to his left, enjoying their own bowls. Naruto had kept his promise to play with them earlier today and even brought Gamakichi and Gamatatsu into it. The two younger toads were situated on the counter to his far right, enjoying their own snacks. This is a fine establishment you've got here, miss, Gamakichi told her after he wiped his mouth. I'll make sure all the toads back home know of it. Glad to hear it. Her dark brown eyes then turned to Naruto and her head tilted slightly. And where's Karin-chan? I thought she'd be with you today. Naruto froze for a moment at the inquiry, mind racing with thoughts on what to say as he swallowed his noodles. She's a bit busy at the moment with the old man after everything that's happened. But I'll bring her as soon as I get a chance. Ayam took his words at face value and left it at that, and Naruto went back to eating until a familiar voice drew his attention. Who would have thought the dead last in class would be the first to make it to Chunin? Kiba said without any malice in his words as he approached them with Akamaru on his head. The pup had a bandage wrapped around one of his legs, but otherwise looked healthy. At least it takes some of the sting out of losing to you at the preliminaries. You're that loud boy that was cheering on Naruto at the finals, aren't you? Ayam asked after a moment of thought. When he nodded, she gestured to an empty seat. I'll grab you a bowl as well, on the house. Mom always did tell me it was rude to refuse when a woman offers you food. Akamaru gave a short bark at that. It counts outside the dinner table too. The Inuzuka took a seat next to Naruto and sat Akamaru on the seat next to him. The ninja pup looked over to Gamakichi and let loose an inquiring bark. Gamakichi, apparently understanding him, grabbed one of the snacks to his brother's dismay and lightly tossed it underhanded for the pup to try. Akamaru nibbled on it while Kiba placed an elbow on the counter and watched Ayam as she worked at the noodles and pot, humming softly. Naruto's brows creased at the sight as he finished slurping a few noodles. He didn't like that look Kiba was giving Ayam. She was like an older sister to him, and you didn't ogle a friend's sister. He tapped him with his elbow to get the message across and then asked, "Did things get settled between Hinata and her cousin?" He nodded. That beating seemed to set him straight, though Hinata did mention her father went and had a talk with him after the match. Either way, they're at least on talking terms, and I don't have to kick in her cousin's teeth, so I think we can call it settled for now. "And how's your sensei doing?" Naruto asked next, in a slightly lower tone. No sense in Iame or the other kids hearing it. Sakura mentioned that the same guy who got her also got Sasuke and Kakashi. "She's managing well enough to be out tomorrow," he said in a low tone that brimmed with raw and seething anger just beneath the surface. "I'm still going to find the guy who put her in there in the first place and tear them to shreds." "I want to make them pay too," Konohamaru said in a low voice as well. Naruto looked over to his side to see the younger boy had stopped eating, instead staring at his reflection in what was left of the broth. He was frowning and his eyes were narrowed. "They hurt my uncle too." "Just don't let that anger take over," Naruto told them both, grabbing their attention. "I know what it's like to get mad at someone enough to want to make them pay with their lives. But that anger can make you do something you'll regret in the process." His thoughts drifted off to that time in the forest, wreathed in the cloak of malevolent chakra. Had Karin been a second slower in calling out to him, his own teammate would have died by his hands. Though Sakura may not remember that moment because of the battle with Gaara, Naruto wouldn't ever forget it. "So what? We're just supposed to sit on our thumbs and let it go?" Kiba asked gruffly. Naruto shook his head. "We train and become strong enough to protect what's important to us, so the next time it won't happen. But we shouldn't go looking for revenge. If we do, there's no telling what our anger will make us do in the end." That sounds like something Shino would say, but whatever. "It's not like they're even telling us who it is that did it in the first place," Kiba said dismissively, straightening himself up as Iam returned with his food. "Thanks." "You better teach us all something new soon, boss," Konohamaru demanded. "We've already got down how to do the sexy." His words were muffled as Naruto covered his mouth. The newly minted Chunin gestured his head towards Iam. She had an eyebrow raised in disapproval and her hands on her hips. "I'll teach you something else later," Naruto promised, trying his hardest to ignore Iam's annoyed glare and Kiba's amused glance. "Just be patient for a bit, okay?" "And that's my room," Anko said, pointing to room on the right. It had a nameplate on it. "I don't need to explain that it's off limits, do I?" "No, ma'am," Karin said to the woman in the mesh bodysuit and tan overcoat as she guided her through the rather modest home that Karin had been assigned to live in with her. It had 2 rooms, each with their own bathroom and spacious closet, a kitchen mixed with a dining room, a living room, and an attic. The place was rather large compared most of the other places she stayed, outside of the base where she trained under Orochimaru, and that place had other issues. However, the majority of Karin's attention was elsewhere. Mostly on Naruto as he ate at where they had met for the first time outside of the Forest of Death, at the restaurant owned by Iam and her father. Right now he was with a few other people, but she was only familiar with 2 of their chakra signatures, the Inuzuka and his pup. The others were now memorized, and if she ran across them in person with her power active, she'd recognize them and be able to put faces to the signatures. Her attention returned to her immediate surroundings when she felt the skin on her left leg crawling. She lifted her leg to scratch it, only to find a small snake coiled around the limb and staring at her. Karin let out a surprised yelp before shaking her leg to get it off. The serpent ended up arching in the air, only for the older woman's outstretched hand to catch it. It shook its head as though to clear it before slithering into her sleeve. Anko's furrowed light brown eyes and frown made it clear she was displeased about something. Then again, so was Karin. She met the woman's gaze with her own. "What's the big idea?" "You weren't paying full attention to me," Anko said, crossing her arms. "Otherwise you would have noticed that constrictor snakelet I summoned while we were walking around, or the fact that I've been gesturing to it a couple of times. I assume you were using your sensory ability." Karin averted her eyes at having been caught. That was one flaw of her power, the fact that it was dependent on her active attention. With the majority of her attention halfway across the village, a seal-less variation of a summoning technique or gestures could slip through the net if it was something small like that. It's not like I didn't hear everything you said. Your ability is already a security risk as is, especially since there's no obvious signs it's active barring your attention shifting. And given what I've read, I'm assuming you're using it to violate the blonde brat's privacy by spying on him now, aren't you? I'm not spying on him. I was just... She trailed off as she realized that mentioning she was just observing him while he wasn't aware to see if he was still in the village and doing well based on his chakra levels may not sound better. Anko sighed. If you're going to waste this chance you've been given, then we may as well just give you the boot now. You'll be a liability more than anything else. I'm not trying to waste it, Karin said. I want to stay here, and I'm doing my best to prove it. Then I'll only tell you this once. When I'm in front of you, I demand your full attention as your overseer for the duration of your probation. Anything less is a mark against you. And if we're out of the village or undergoing an assignment, it's an automatic trip to the Hawkage to have him rescind his generous terms. Karin's teeth clenched. This woman clearly had no intention of making life easier for her. There would be no third chance either. Anko continued after letting the threat sink in. Even if the Hawkage seals the records, the fact is you were a spy for Sound and Grass. That's 2 villages that you've betrayed to put yourself into a better position here, regardless of the circumstances. Anyone who knows that much will be leery of your loyalties to this village, and most of those people are in a high enough position to influence your life here in ways that will make you wish you were in a cell. Keep your priorities straight and don't screw up even a step, otherwise you'll be gone. Yes, ma'am, she said again, cutting off her mind's eye. You have my full attention. Looking her up and down with analytical eyes, Anko nodded and then pulled out a small notebook from her overcoat pocket. This is your lifeline. It's a schedule for the week listing, among other things, when you are free to sleep, leave the premises under watch, and your training regimen. At the end of every week, I'll assess your behavior and determine what the next week will look like. There's also a list of rules on the back that change depending on how well you behave too. Karin caught it when she tossed it to her underhanded and then opened it. The time was broken down into hours, with a majority partitioned to studying, physical training, and chakra training. There was also an hour given for the 3 meals and bathing and 6 hours of sleep. That left her only an hour of free time a day. Her lips pursed. That was barely enough time to do anything. She flipped to the rules and saw that she couldn't even go visit Naruto if she wanted to. I get not being able to bring anyone to the house, but why am I not allowed visit Naruto? We're from the same clan. Because it's a privilege that you need to earn, she said simply. Besides, he's a Chunin now. That means he'll be away a lot more often, and you'll need to learn to be less dependent on him. It'll do you more good in the end. Karin reluctantly nodded. There was no point in arguing, even though she really wanted to. Besides, she could just use her free hour to check up on him with her power and make sure he was okay. What am I supposed to be studying? Things we expect from Genin native to the village, she said. If you're going to live here, then you need to know the history of the village and take a citizenship test. So you'll be brushing up on that and a few other topics, and one of your choice that's geared towards what you want to do in the future. I'm going to be a censor, Karin said. That's what you have planned, right? Your abilities might be useful as hell in tracking targets, but there's no telling what's going to happen in the future, Anko said. In a worst-case scenario, you might end up crippled or traumatized from an incident and thus become useless in that aspect. Or you might choose to retire and be a mother, what with only 2 of your clan left. So you need to study up on an alternative path in life to take as well. I myself am working on earning a teaching license in my free time. Karin's mind's eye becoming unavailable was theoretically possible if unlikely. The trauma of losing her home did subconsciously instill a means of turning it on and off after all, so it was possible that she could lose the ability to use it entirely if something even more traumatic than that happened. But the chances of that were so slim that they may as well have been non-existent. "Fine," Karin said. "I'll follow your rules and schedule to the letter." "Good." Anko gestured to the room on the left. "Then get settled into your room. That schedule kicks in starting tomorrow." Sasuke walked down the back alley streets of the Hidden Leaf as he made his way back towards the abandoned district that he called home. He had been cleared from the hospital now, his arm healed and his mind stable. The lucky one of those attacked that day, the nurses said to pad out the silence as the memory of his encounter with Itachi haunted him. He'd thought he'd gotten stronger. No, he knew that he had. However, it hadn't been nearly enough to pose a threat to his brother. It hadn't even taken Itachi 5 seconds to swat him like a fly. His hand rose to the crook of his neck where the sealed cursed mark dwelled. It itched every now and again, reminding him that it was still there. He couldn't help but wonder if things would have gone differently if he had access to the power within it. The itching died down as he reached the mouth of the alley that gave a clear view of the entrance to the district. It was normally devoid of life, barring the stray cats that occasionally wandered in and out freely, chasing down the rats that had made themselves the new residents of the abandoned buildings. That wasn't the case this time. Sakura was standing with her back against the wall, cradling a small package in her arms. Had she ran there to arrive before he did? Either way, she straightened herself out when she saw him coming. "Sasuke, how are you feeling?" "I'm fine." He came to a stop in front of her, hands in his pocket. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to see if you were okay after everything that happened." "Like I said, I'm fine. I just need some time to think, alone." He made sure to stress that last point. The slight downturn in her eyes showed she got the underlying message. Still, Sakura extended her hands with the package in it for him. "At least take this. I figured you'd like food more than flowers." He took it and looked inside. They were basic senbei, simple rice crackers that looked handmade. Did she make these for him? "Thanks," Sasuke said reluctantly before he entered the district without observing her response, making his way further in. His destination was the home where he lived with his parents and brother before the slaughter. Entering the room where his parents died, Sasuke sat down and just stared at the dark patches where his parents' blood had been spilled. The memories of that night played in his head again, but he stared at it unwaveringly and let the scene play out. For too long he had been horrified by sight of their death, haunted by these memories to the extent that Itachi used it against him twice. He had to grow numb to it so there wouldn't be a third time he couldn't fail to avenge them when they next met. Itachi had let his reason for sparing Sasuke slip that day. He sought to drive him to the edge of despair and allow that to grant him greater eyes. Those very same eyes that he planned to pluck from his skull and once more take everything from him. Sasuke wouldn't let him win. He wouldn't allow it. That meant he had to get stronger and purge himself of all his weaknesses. And there were 3 obvious ones that he had carelessly allowed to take root inside of him. Looking back, the mission to Wave was the starting point. He took what should have been a mortal blow for someone else, an act that would have denied himself the chance to avenge his clan had Haku not been too soft. The Forest of Death was no better. Naruto, Sakura, Kakashi. He had allowed his team to get closer to him to the extent that he simply couldn't let them die if it came down to it. He'd made them prime targets for Itachi to kill when he returned. Worse, when he was around them, he could almost forget the tragedy and his purpose for seeking power. That couldn't stand. Dropping the gift he received from Sakura onto the ground, fire leapt from his lips to engulf it. The glow of the flames illuminated the darkness of the room as he remained fixed in place, once more burning into his eyes the motivation for him becoming an avenger.
That will be all for part 5. Please check out the author in the description. And have a nice day to you all.